Good morning. I want to recap Dark Age of Man, Session 3. This is a playtest of the game Dell and I are currently in the process of developing and writing. Um, this playtest is set up to do a couple of things. One, it was to place them in a different position in the world. They are playing high-ranking characters, so they are high-level characters. But in our game, high-level means they have greater responsibilities. And also, we wanted to play test it now with 3 to 4 people. And so we had 3 guys. Perfect. Dale, of course, plays the Brehon or the Castilian. He is the advisor to the Lord, and he runs the castle for the most part. Todd is playing the Bishop, Gerald. He is in charge of. He's the chief advisor to the Lord on all things spiritual, and he provides all the spiritual services for everybody in Esselveld. And of course, David is Antony, and he is the commander of the forces. He handles all defense, all war, all security, those kind of things. So all 3 of these characters, they are high ranking, and they only answer to the Lord and His family in this country or in this county. Everyone else in this county they would have authority over, except for the Lord and His family. They deal with a 19-year-old heir apparent who is very close to the commander in his training, in preparation for becoming a warrior, and in preparation for becoming the lord of this land. The Lord has a couple of daughters and a couple of young daughters and another young son. And Dell's character's name is Bayron. And again, I put them in fictional Northern Ireland in 875 during the time of the Vikings. And they have a little castle up here on this precipice that's defensible on the cliffs. They own a lot of this land here. And then there's all of our fictional little cities and hamlets and towns are all in this area. And then, of course, we have a fictional king at the Derry, King Braithwaite, and there's a monastery here. And so all these things come into play. But this is and it's called Ireland in our world. But it's, for the most part, this is pseudo-history. This is low fantasy. There is some supernatural, and there is mortality. And there is feudalism and a class structure. So they are playing within the bounds of all of the things that characters, real people, must deal with in reality, right? But they all have great authority, and they are all advisors to the Lord. Okay. And so we started it out. I set this up in scenes: prologue, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and epilogue. And the prologue was designed for them to not only give them a chance to introduce their characters and get into the headspace of their characters, but it was also designed to put introduce to the session the dilemmas that they all had before them. I had given them all pre-session. I had given them all a dilemma. For instance, the bishop has been told by the Pope that he wants a holy relic that's being held by the king down here in Derry, so he's going to have to get that to him and ship it off to London, which will then be sent to the Pope in Rome. So the bishop has this holy relic that he's supposed to secure from Derry and from an opposing king. The commander is weighing a problem that Shamshire, one of their forts on the river here in this side of the precipice, or this side of the has been taken by a neighboring baron, and they're gonna have to go oust him from their fort. You know, how dare this baron do this? And the Brehon has discovered that the former Castilian for the Lord has stolen land out from under the nose of his lord. And he's discovered this in the records. And that's how we start. So in the prologue, we meet the bishop. The bishop meets 3 soldiers that are traveling. He makes conversation with them. He asks them some questions. He finds out they're headed to Derry to look at this holy artifact. He tries to get more information. He fells a prestige roll, spirit roll, and they fold up shop. And I think he had a critical failure. They end the conversation immediately. They get on their horses and they bid him good day and they ride away. But they have a nice cordial meeting. He finds out that they're well-spoken Englishmen, and he doesn't know who they work for because he doesn't recognize their tabards, which are hidden under cloaks at first. He also sees there are 3 criminals in the stocks and one hanging in a cage, and he goes over and he talks to the jailer. He finds out what they've done, and he says that he's going to send Father Innes around to feed and water these men. And then as he's talking to them, a rider, a soldier from the castle arrives. He's barely in saddle. He's badly wounded. His left shoulder crushed in and bleeding. And he stops and he says to the bishop, "My brother William, when is the last time you heard his confession?" And the bishop says, "Oh, a week ago." And he says, "Would he be saved?" And he said, "Yes, I think he would be." And he says, "Good, because so thank God, because he is dead. His head adorns a pike in front of Shamshire." And he says, "I bid you a good day. I have to ride to the castle and tell the Lord." And so he spurs his horse up the hill. It's a mile from this village. And then we go to the commander. And the commander is currently in a sword lesson with the boy. He's teaching the boy. They're working on the boy's sword fighting. And in this sword fight, the boy says, "What are you going to do about Shamshire? We can't just let local neighbors and barons take our land, take our property. What are you going to do about it? What's the deal?" And he tells the boy, "Be patient, but I and your father, we will decide what to do. You will come along for the ride, and you will witness how we do these things. But focus on your fighting right now." And as they're fighting, the soldier arrives. He climbs off the horse. He's one of the commander's best soldiers, and he's one of the commander's favorite soldiers. And his name is Thomas. And he climbs off, and he comes limping in. He is clearly wounded and injured. And he tells them that he's got bad news. Shamshire is not just taken by the Baron, but that the Baron is in league with Vikings. That he has actually allied with barbarians, and these barbarians have murdered everybody at the fort. They have put their heads on pikes, including my brother. He says, "I did the best I could to escape and hide, and I counted every head I could, and I kept a rock in the bag as count, so I would not lose count." And he dumps it out on the table, and he says, "It's 42." And then he collapses. David calls over his best man, Duncan, who's a medic and a healer, and he tells Duncan, "This man must survive. He is a hero. He brings us bad news, but he brings us information that's necessary. I want you to make sure this man lives, and I want you to make sure he is capable again." And I asked David to make a roll. This is a command roll, basically. And so David makes a roll. He succeeds. And it's a critical success, which means he can remove a couple of wounds. And wounds add up to death. But you can also have injuries, which affect your actual attributes. And so I say you can either heal his wounds too, or you can actually fix his injury. And he orders Duncan to repair that arm, make sure this man can fight again, make sure this man can be whole again. And so Duncan says, "I will take him to the infirmary. We will make him comfortable, and I can tell you now, I will be able to do that." And then we move up into the castle, second floor, the office, as the Brehon is working at his desk while the Lord is dictating to the scribe orders that he is giving the Brants at Brantfield Parcel. He is kicking the Brants out of their family-owned estate. He is going to raise their estate, and he is going to use that land for crops because it's close to the river and they can irrigate, etc. So he's kicking an old family out of their home, and he's going to turn that all into crops. And so he's proud of himself, and he's saying to the Brehon, "Am I not a smart man? We're going to get a greater crop yield this year. Isn't that wonderful?" And of course, the Brehon says, "Yes, of course you are. Of course, my lord, you are fantastic. Isn't this great?" The Lord then says, "Tell me, by the way, have you talked to the commander about Shamshire? What are we going to do with the Baron, that crazy Baron?" And he says, "Well, no, sir, I haven't yet, but I will, and we'll then advise you." And he doesn't say anything about Narfol's deceit in stealing land right from under the Lord's nose. He keeps that to himself, and the Lord dismisses himself, says, "I'm going to go have lunch. I've earned it. I've worked hard this morning." He leaves the room, and Dell's character stands and says, "Listen, I want you to go get Samson. Is Samson around?" He says, "Yes, Samson was in the courtyard this morning." He says, "Go fetch Samson right now." So the scribe runs down, and in a few minutes comes back with Samson. And Samson is the game warden for the entire land. And Samson, of course, hat in hand, nervous because he's been called before the Brehon. And the Brehon is basically in Ireland is the judge. He's a lawyer and he's a judge, but he's also the Castilian here. So he thinks he's in trouble. And the Brehon says, "Sit, fool, relax. You're not in trouble. Sit down. I want to talk to you." So he sits him down and he says, "Listen, what do you know about Grantham and Grantham Moor?" And he says, "Oh, it's dangerous. It's rocky. It's craggy. It's bad country. It's also loaded with mires and bogs, and it's dangerous stuff. And there's an old ruined keep there called Grantham Hall that's a mess. And rumors are there's something evil that lurks there." And he says, okay. He said, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down everything you know about it. I want you to draw me a map. And then I want you to go find a parcel of land that we're going to move the brands to there. And he says, do you want them to have good land, sir, or bad land? He says, good land, the best land you can find. He says, okay, sir, I will do that. And so he draws him a map. He can't write, so he just tells him what he knows, and he draws him a map. And then Dell's character, Bayron, dismisses him. Now go, get out of here, go do this. I want this dealt with quickly. And then we fade to black, and that's our prologue. So Act 1, we fade up, and I described that they're 2 in the morning. They've all been roused from bed by the Lord. They're standing on the palisade walls overlooking this inlet. Right? Remember, their keep is up here on the very top. They're overlooking this sea inlet. And there are fires below, miles below, as Vikings have landed, and they have burned and razed villages, and they've burned and razed farmsteads, and they are here. They are Viking, right? And he points it out, and he says, "This commander, do you not agree? This is the first time they've ever been this close to our lands, this close to our home. What do you think it's time we deal with this threat once and for all?" And David's character, punches his fist and says, "Yes, whether we like it or not, we now must deal with this. We haven't had to deal with it in a long time, but it's time we deal with this." And then he says, "Bishop, what do you say?" And the bishop says, "Yes, they raid our monasteries, they plunder our holy sites. I agree, we must deal with it." And then he says, "Brehan, what do you think?" And Dell's character says, "Yes, the more land they take from us, the more money we lose, and the more people are displaced, and the tinier you become, and eventually you cease to exist, basically." And so he goes, "We're all in agreement. Then go to bed, and in the morning at breakfast, we will have a formal discussion and prioritize what we must do and how we must do it." And and he dismisses everybody, but he stops the commander and he says, "Commander, tell me, is my son ready?" And David says, "Yes, there's no doubt your son is he's vigilant, he's working very hard, and yes, I believe he's ready to face these things." And he says, "Then I have one final question. Is my son a coward?" And David, as Antony says, raises an eyebrow and says, "Coward? No, sir. As a matter of fact, he's enthusiastic. As a matter of fact, I think he's too enthusiastic to find out what death and destruction look like. But no, sir, he is no coward." And he says, "Good. You have been." He says, "I want you to know you have been a good servant and a good man to me for years, a great advisor. Thank you." And he goes to bed. And David says, "I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to look out from the palisade walls. I'm going to put my hands on the wood palisade fence, and I'm going to look at these fires burning below. And I'm reflecting upon what faces these people, my friends, the family. I know death is coming, and I know it's going to be ugly and violent." And I immediately score David a +1 that he can use anytime during the game, as he reflects and has this moment of contemplation, looking out over the over the Viking invasion. And I give him a +1 that he can use anytime during session to bolster anything. And he said, "That's cool." And next morning, after breakfast, the Lord dismisses his wife and his 2 young daughters and his young son. He dismisses the cook and all of the servants from the hall, and it's just these 3 plus his oldest son. And the Lord tells him, his oldest son, "Sit down, shut up, only speak if we ask you a question. You need to learn, you need to watch, you need to be quiet." And the boy says, "Absolutely, Father," and he sits down. And he, again, says, "I have heard about Shamshire. It sounds as if the Baron has allied with our kin has allied with Viking barbarians. This is not good. We now face a threat in Shamshire, and we now face a new threat as it's arrived on our shores just last night. What do we prioritize?" And they have a long conversation. We have a debate. Adele's character believes that we should they should pit Viking against Viking, or they should pit Baron against Viking, and not get involved with Shamshire, so to speak. Meanwhile, Todd's character, the bishop, and David's character, the commander, they both agree that they should try to ally with the Baron, because the Baron has more to lose. The Baron is also a kinsfolk, and why can't we ally with him and that Viking against this new Viking? And they then say, "But of course, sir, it is your call." And he agrees with both the commander and the bishop. "I am sending you all to personally negotiate with the Baron and this Viking to join us against this new threat. And I want you to leave today, and you cannot take my army because I only have 15 men here readily at this fort, at my castle to guard us. You're going to have to go alone, but you can conscript any of our peasants and our serfs and able-bodied men along the way as a force. And he writes it, and the Brehon says, well, you need to put that in writing, and we can read that and make sure that you mark it so people know that we are acting on behalf of you. And he's like, great idea. So we write it down. We put our signet ring mark upon it. And those three plus the Lord's son mount up fully armored on their horses, and they set out for Shamshire. And I asked them to make prestige rolls along the way, and the prestige rolls will determine how many loyal subjects they muster into an army on their way. And I had already decided that if they pass, they get 10 soldiers each. If they fail, they don't get any soldiers. And all three of them pass. So in this journey through the whole day, they're able to conscript 30 peasants. So remember, these guys are armed with clubs, pitchforks, machetes, daggers. They are farmers. They're peasants. But this is how you build a force in these armies. The people who have sworn fealty to your Lord can be called upon as an army. They just have to enact it. They have to demand it. And the Lord had also told them, anybody who refuses you, you can execute for treason. Meanwhile, they all passed the rolls. So I told them, you now have amassed an army of 30 people, plus you. So there's 34 of you. And they know that at Shamshire, Thomas had counted 42. So they know now they got an army that's almost as good as the Vikings. The problem is the Vikings are a veteran army, right? So they're dealing with like these peasant force. So they may be close in number, but they're not the same in quality. They stop at a rise right before sundown. They set camp not far from Shamshire. They decide they need to send an emissary to Shamshire to tell the Baron that they want audience. They want to seek audience so they can parley and they can make treaty. And they have to pick somebody to do this. And the young lord volunteers. And of course, David as commander says, no, lords don't deliver messages. Lords are lordly, and you're not going to leave my side. And he convinces the boy that your job is to be a lord, not to run messages. And he says, oh, yeah, right, okay. And so they agree. The bishop says, I asked Father McGinnis to do it. And I said, he's very nervous. He's scared. He could bumble this. And so I basically tell Todd, as Gerald, the bishop, you're going to have to make a roll to coach him in what to say and how to behave. And so he makes a successful roll. They coach up the father, and they send a boy with him to give him another morale boost, and they send him off to do their bidding. And after sundown, everybody's eating. They put up tents. They have a camp. They were able to hunt along the journey, etc. So everybody's eating rabbit or mutton or whatever. And the father returns, and he's in good spirits, and he tells them exactly what Thomas told them. The fort is surrounded. All of the victims of our heads are on pikes that surround the walls. He is indeed standing. The Baron was indeed at the right hand of a giant barbarian that they call Uther the Reckless, and he's a pretty terrifying looking guy. But they will indeed allow you into the hall. So these guys wanted a formal audience in the hall. They did not want to meet on the battlefield. They did not want to be parlaying over a fence. They demanded that they get formal audience in the hall. And the father returns because of Todd's successful role. This guaranteed that they would get what they wanted, right? So, and I told them that if you make this roll, it guarantees you'll get an audience in the hall, what you exactly want. Okay, if you fail, who knows what you're going to get. And so they know that. They knew that. And the father comes back and tells them, yes, indeed, we got the thing. Okay, tomorrow morning at this time. Okay, so the next morning, it's foggy, it's cold, they're up at dawn, they're preparing to go. The four of them are preparing to ride. And two of the peasants that were on guard came and said, early this morning we spotted two Danes that were in the forest, and they were circling our camp, and they were clearly spying us. And when we attempted to apprehend them or talk to them, they ran away. We just wanted you to know that there have been two barbarians watching us. And so now they all go, okay, wait, what does this mean? Does this mean there's a different group of Danes? Does this mean it's the same group? Either way, what they may knew or they may not have put two and two together, but these Danes went back and told the barbarian exactly what they were dealing with. So they weren't going to be able to bluff the barbarian that they had 150 men. They weren't going to be able to, this barbarian leader was going to know everything about their peasant pathetic army. So they were not going to be able to bluff this barbarian. But I don't know if they put two and two together that he now had more information. Now, had David said before camp, I want to make sure I put a lot of guys on watch some, but again, that was kind of an assumed thing, and because we didn't talk about it, I took fiat on that, and I said that they basically were spied. Okay, and this was going to be an effect upon the negotiations. That's all it was, right? Okay. Dell's character Brayok decides that they've got to send message back to the Lord. The Lord has to know what's happening. They have to know that they have secured. They have to know that they have an army, just in case something goes wrong. The Lord needs to know what they know. So they send a runner, and he says, I'll write it. And he tells the commander, give me your best guy. And so the commander says, I want the youngest kid, the fastest kid. And so they call this boy over, and they say, here, take this. Run as hard and as fast as you can. Take this straight to the Lord. And by the way, don't die. And, he runs off into the fog early in the morning, the boy, with this codicil and this scroll. And they've covered every base. So now they mount up, the four of them mount up, and I say, who's carrying the flag? Who's the flag bearer? And they all agree David, as the commander, should be carrying the flag. And I immediately give David a +1. So gear can give a +1 to attributes. So David's character, with his prestige, I think of 2 or 3, with the flag now has a 4 prestige. And I said, now for the remainder of this, you will have 4 prestige for the remainder of this parlay with this Viking. And in any situation in which prestige comes up, as the flag bearer, you'll have a +1 prestige. And they approach the Shamshire. They see all these Vikings and the Baron's men on the walls watching them. And as they arrive, the gates open and they come in. And the barbarians roughhouse them off the horses. They pull them off the horses. They take their horses away to the stables. And they're standing in the yard as they see this huge barbarian step out of the hall. And beside him is this little Baron. And they're far enough away they can't see details, but they can see how big this man is. And he, in bad English, tells them, come in, don't waste my time, come in. And as they walk across, Dell's character says, I stand erect, head high, I don't look at any of these people, I don't let them know I'm flustered, I am utterly in command of myself. And I said, that's cool. So Dell's character is literally in command, right? It's a prestige. He's activating his prestige, although I don't yet ask him to make a roll. Dell's character already has a good prestige. He's in robes, he has a great prestige, so all he has to do is activate it. So Dell's describing, without saying, I want to activate my prestige, Dell describes to me how he's activating his prestige. So if you watch the AP, you won't hear an exchange there, but Dell and I know. There's also something that comes up later in which I probably should have clarified to Todd that his character did affect the thing, and you can see it in the AP, but I don't actually tell Todd that he did. So I think Todd may not have realized how he affected it, but I'll explain it here. Meanwhile, I have Todd's character make a check as he looks around for the chapel. And he sees to his left the chapel has been burned to the ground and that the priest is dead and they've crucified him. And now Todd's character is pissed. He's now seething, and Todd is brilliant. Todd seethes through this entire negotiation. His character is angry, bitter, and I got to be honest with you, I have a feeling Gerald probably regrets his advice to the Lord that they ally with these people. So Todd may be he's not regretting it, but his character may well be regretting that he said we should ally with these people. I think Todd at this point would like to just kill them all, right? As the bishop seeing what they've done to his priest. A priest, not his priest, but a priest. He knows this is Wraith. This is Father Wraith. Okay. Meanwhile, I asked David to make a command check, basically, to make a check with his mind and assess quickly the military situation. And he does. It's everything Thomas described. It is a fortifiable, defensible fort, and they man the walls, and there are about 40 of them. But worse, none of the Baron's men are here. All of the individuals that are wearing the Baron's uniform are actual barbarians that disguised themselves as the Baron's men. They realize before they even walk up the steps into the hall that there is no Baron's men here. There are no actual Irishmen here. The Baron is a stooge. They have murdered and destroyed the Baron's men, and they all were faking that they were partly the Baron's men. So now they know they're really dealing with the Vikings. The Baron is irrelevant. And as they walk up and they get close now, they can see the Baron is missing 2 fingers. They cut off his ring fingers. He's holding that hand bandaged close. They can see he's got a split lip. He's bruised. He's battered. He's filthy. The Baron, quite literally, has been a puppet. And to add insult to injury, he puts his giant hand on the chest of the Baron as they walk up toward him, and he pushes the Baron out of the way so they can walk by him and into the hall. As the barbarian steps aside and offers them entrance into his hall. And they see for the first time this barbarian up close. And he's got bones tied in his beard. He's missing his teeth. He's got a painted face. He's 6'6", and he is old. He's like 52 years old. His body is scarred. He's stripped from the waist down. So he's got pants on, but he has no shirt on. He's painted. And they see now that he is a formidable warrior, because you don't get to be 52 years old commanding men in the field if you are not formidable, if you have not seen many campaigns. And so they can assess, as I tried to explain to him, this is a dangerous warrior. Be careful. And he knows he has the upper hand. He even knows the size of their force, and he even knows the peasants. They don't know he knows all this. So I already had set this bar very, very high for them to negotiate. Okay. So they come in, they take their seats, and this negotiation starts, and it's fantastic. And I kept waiting for them to actually make the offer, but I also kept waiting for them to actually say, we want you to ally with us. It took a long time, but they never once really said to him, we want you to ally with us. Dell began to outline what he wanted. He wanted them to clear Grantham Hall, which I could barely contain myself when he put Grantham Hall on the table as a chore that he demanded they do in payment and in service and for this land. Because they don't know that Grantham Hall, this is the land that Narfel, the old Castilian, stole from their lord. They don't know that he's a vampire and that he is surrounded by 6 succubi vampire wives. So he has just put on the table that he's going to demand that this Viking and his men clear out Grantham so they can farm that land. And in doing so, that money they earn from the farming of that land will actually pay this Viking a stipend. So what Dell is doing is he's telling him, I'm going to pay you 2 silver right now, today, out of my pocket. This is a bonus to his role. And by the way, we're going to give you, you clear the land, we'll farm the land, and you'll get money from that land. But Dell doesn't know vampires are there. So it's like this amazing moment where I can barely contain myself. I'm like, oh my God, he's about to try to talk to this Viking. And none of them know that there's vampires there. So this is very cool. Meanwhile, he's asking them to do this, which is a negative. Every demand that he makes, I give him a -1. So I want you to clear out Grantham Hall. That's a -1. I want you to be our ally in a fight against your own people, as they've just invaded, and we need you to join us. That's a negative. Meanwhile, I'm giving you 2 silver pieces. That's +2, and I'm going to give you 4 silver per year off the revenue of that land. And the Viking, I cut that down to 2, as the Viking said, I don't believe in the future. You can't promise me something you don't have. So I only made it a +2, not a +4. So we have +4 versus -2. We have +2. So basically, the 2 silver pieces are all that stand. David says, I want to give him my +1 that I earned earlier. And I said, this is brilliant, but you're going to have to narrate how you impact this scene. And David, literally, it was brilliant. David says, listen, not only are we not going to be at war with you now, not only are you going to have this land, but understand your children will be our kinfolk. I mean, it was brilliant. And the barbarian, he said, you will now be, your people will now be one of us. And I said, that's amazing. And I gave him the +1. Earlier in the conversation, before this, he said to Dell's character, I want 10 silver pieces and I won't kill you. Todd's character, seething. He's angry. Todd has been quiet. I can see his character seething because he's angry. They've murdered a priest. He hates this guy. He hates him. And Todd's character says to him, you must become Christian. That, too, must be part of this deal. And we have this exchange. And I said, the barbarian hates your passive god. He's already murdered. He has 0 respect for you or your god. Meanwhile, what Todd didn't know is that was an instant success. There was no die roll. Todd's character shook the barbarian. Now, the barbarian's response was a bluff. But immediately, and I should have said to Todd, that's an automatic success. You've just changed the nature of his demands. But I should have clarified that, but I didn't. But either way, Todd actually had an automatic success there because he delivered it with such vehemence and hatred, and it was literally in conjunction with what they demand of this Viking. So the next thing out of the Viking's mouth, I'll take 8 silver pieces. So that was again my way of saying he actually knocked 2 silver off of this deal. I probably should have had that count in the final roll too. I had taken it off his demands of 8 silver pieces to buy him, right? So there was an automatic success that just didn't carry over to the final negotiation. Okay, so David's character says and understands something. You will not only have land, you will not only have income, but your children will be our kinfolk. And so he could use that +1 toward Dale's roll. So now they have a +3. Well, guess what? Todd instantly says, but you must convert to Christian. These people must be Christians. And I said, ooh, you're going to have to make a roll. If you fail the roll, it's going to hurt you. If you succeed, it won't hurt the negotiation. Well, Todd failed. And so I took the +1 David just earned away. So David gave him +1. Todd failed his spirit check, his prestige check, and therefore they lost the +1. So Dell has to make this roll with just his 2 silver pieces on his purse roll. So it's his prestige and purse roll. He rolls, he succeeds, they celebrate. The barbarian stands up and says, we have a deal, we will clear Grantham Hall, so you can farm that land and pay me, and I will ally with you against my kinfolk, this new invader. This is now our land. I will help you. And so they celebrate. They spend hours celebrating with these barbarians, and they learn again how crazy these barbarians are. They get drunk. They fist fight. There's a knife fight that breaks out. One barbarian, you can imagine how dangerous this is. And I tell them that meanwhile, through all of this, the Baron sits alone in the back corner. And I say, do any of you want an opportunity to speak to the Baron? And Todd's character says, no, he's a broken man. He's a lost soul. I will not speak to that traitor. And Dell's character shakes his head and just sits. So Dell's character observes everything. He's very quiet. He just observes this stuff. And David says, I'm going to go talk to the Baron. And so David goes over and sits quietly with the Baron. He says to the Baron, what did you think you would gain from this ally? What did you think that you would gain from these people selling yourself to them? And it's brilliant because what David does is he doesn't give commands. His character very carefully implies something. He doesn't actually order or give commands. He's implying that the Baron can only redeem himself in one way. And David plays this masterfully. He stops in the middle and he thinks long and hard about how he wants to present this, because this is huge. This is a major thing he's trying to do. And so he has this conversation with the Baron, and amazingly, he gets the Baron to admit he has no dignity. He gets the Baron to admit he has no honor. He gets the Baron to admit that he's broken. He doesn't tell the Baron you're broken. He doesn't say to the Baron you're dishonorable. He doesn't say to the Baron you're a traitor. He gets the Baron to admit all these things. And I demand he make a roll. And I tell him, though, you can choose any of your 4 attributes to be how you sway him to do the thing you want him to do. And again, David is not defining that thing. What he's doing is he's trying to nudge this Baron into doing something, but he isn't defining the thing yet. And I said you can use body, intimidation. You can use mind as logic. You can use spirit as a spiritual compensation, or you can use your prestige. And David says prestige, no doubt. I mean, it's who I am. It's what I represent versus the Baron and what he's lost. And Dell confirms this, as Dell says, great choice. Again, that's because the commander is at the exact opposite of what the Baron is right now. And it was perfect. This is how the system's meant to work. And before he made the roll, I awarded him a repute point. I said, David, this is epic, and you get a repute point. Now, in our game, a repute point is an experience point, but you get 1 repute point per level. So David's character literally right there leveled up to level 8. So he went from a repute 7 character to a repute 8 character. He automatically gets 1 point that he can add permanently to any of his 4 attributes. And so he immediately spends the attribute on his mind. So he upgrades his mind. He is now level 8. And this is an epic moment. And for repute to be scored, there has to be witnesses to the thing. There has to be a tale to be told. And that's why he got the repute. This could have been a remarkable moment in private, and I probably wouldn't have given him a repute point. But because this is in this party, the Brehon is watching and eavesdropping. The bishop is sitting and watching and eavesdropping. So there's witness to this conversation. And so he gets a repute point. So David's character levels up on the spot to level 8. And he rolls, and he succeeds. And I say, now you're in control. Tell me what you want him to do. So David narrates that we zoom in on his face. He's dead. He's a lost soul. He knows that he cannot be redeemed. His eyes are blank. And we pan down and we see him white knuckle the dagger, and we watch him stumble off through the crowd, through the party, as he decides he's going to throw himself upon Ulfric the Reckless right now. He's not going to wait for the perfect time. With what rage left in him, he's going to throw himself at the barbarian right now. And we have this fight. And as you can imagine, the barbarian wins. And the barbarian, we have a combat. So David makes every roll. And whoever wins the roll, that's damage. And so the barbarian damages him, throws him across the room. And then he actually stabs the barbarian once. And then the barbarian damages him again. And then David has this moment, and I describe after he's dislocated his arm, and he's standing there bent over with a dagger in his hand, and his arm's dislocated. He's this is it. I mean, he's on his last wound. And I tell this to David, and David says, he knows it, I know it. And he said he looks up in the crowd, and he finds me, and we make eye contact. And I know now that he knows this is the best he could do, and this is all he can do. And with what left rage he has left, he musters some final guttural, pathetic scream, and he launches himself at the barbarian. He rolls, and it's a critical failure, which is an injury or double damage in our game. He only has one wound left, so this is literally, I mean, it's insult to injury. So I describe how he uses his own hand and dagger to actually cut himself from groin to sternum. And then the barbarian props him up in the seat, leaving him there with his hand and his dagger jammed into his chest, and props him up, poses in there on the chair, and they all cheer as our heroes stand quietly watching, not cheering, not speaking, and we fade to black. Session ends there. We still have Act 3 and 4. I told them Act 3 is the Derry Monastery. They will be en route to the Derry Monastery to start Act 3. But we ended there. That was the cutoff time. These gents are brilliant players, and they are remarkable people to want to give up their Friday night to test play our little game. They stayed 20 minutes afterwards to give us feedback, all of it very good feedback. You can watch all of this, by the way, in our actual play. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. The last 20 minutes is feedback. It's all recorded live, so you can see it here on the channel. And more importantly, we prove the integrity of the system works. And not only as David pointed out, the setting informs our play as characters in a feudal system, but then your attributes inform our play as characters, and we can use those attributes to inform how we want to be a character, what kind of character we want to be. So the integrity of the math worked, the integrity of what we expected the system and the setting to do for them as characters worked, and then the simple activation of the mechanics is either an automatic success or a simple roll to achieve something. And I got to tell you, without a doubt, now we've played 3 sessions. I ran a session one-on-one. Dell ran a session with me one-on-one, and now we've been able to do what we wanted to do: play test this with 3 more players, put it in high-level gaming. They are at a higher level authority. So they not only have player agency, but they actually have authority as these characters advising the Lord. And the system integrity was remarkably stable and held up perfectly as we could use the dice for those situations we had to decide the fate of the situation. It was wonderful. And to be honest with you, I look forward to not only continuing to use this, but I look forward to continuing to write it, proofread it, test it, and finish it, and publish it, and make it available to the whole world. I'm proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of the work I'm doing with Dell as a collaborative effort. I'm proud that we've been able to share it with our friends and get feedback from them. And so anyway, thank you for listening. You can watch the live play if you want to know more about how it actually went down. All right, thank you. Bye.